Can we actually unlearn the habit that destabilize our mood? Welcome to Bipolar Talk, the space to discuss all things bipolarity. I'm Clément Baissat, bipolar type 2 and founder of HopeStage. Today, we dig into advanced applied neuroscience, practical brain-based tool for more stability. My guests are Reut Schwartz-Ebran, certified partner at Key Change Institute, and Susan Vogel, who is transforming coach applying science, neuroscience to difficult change. So she also writes some book. Together, they help people translate brain science into everyday action. And I just let you present yourself, Reut.
Thank you so much. So I'm an author. I'm a certifying partner with KCI, as you said, which is basically an organization that certifies and trains coaches and change facilitators and therapists sometimes. And we have a unique focus. Advanced applied neuroscience is a unique focus, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. Let's start with that.
And Susan, can you do the same?
Absolutely. I'm Susan Vogel. As you said, I'm a transformation coach. I've been in business for a long time, and a lot of it is applied to folks in the business community, but not always. And it's probably important to note that I have multiple family members with bipolar. So I do have some personal experience while I do not have it myself. And to the extent that I can, add some context to some of what we talk about, that's where it'll be coming from.
Awesome. I think let's go back to the beginning. Like, we hear the word neuroscience, but what is it?
Yeah, so neuroscience in general talks about how the brain works. From our perspective, from an advanced applied neuroscience perspective, we're particularly interested in how the brain changes and how we facilitate transformation. So not so much interested in, how the brain of people with bipolar, how their brain actually works, but more how do we support them in order to change certain patterns and in order to react differently. And specifically, we're very interested in how people interact with emotional discomfort. So this becomes really, really relevant right here.
The other thing I would add, having partnered with Reut for a good 10 plus years now, she's a scientist. For me, it's very pragmatic, right? So I don't understand the science to the extent that she does, but I know how well it works. And interestingly enough, we found each other during a time when I was delving into some of this, again, for personal reasons, right? So I was sort of studying it on my own to try to understand like executive functioning issues, which, folks often deal with bipolar and some other mental health situations. So for me, it was like such an aha about how impactful it can be and how it can partner with other approaches, right, to maintain health and some of the physical symptoms sometimes that happen, but just how much it could impact the mindset very quickly with some really awesome skills, right? Then it can help us think about this differently, which I'm sure we're going to delve into.
Yeah, I think it's important to put ourselves in the shoes of someone bipolar, like I am. So you have many options, and it's quite difficult to understand like who should you trust. So usually you think like, okay, let's maybe have a psychiatrist that's going to help me maybe with treatment. But then you can also have coach. You can also have psychologists who are also coach. So maybe tell us a little bit like, what do you guys think? Like, what is a perfect team? Because so Susan told me just before that she had some loved one that also have bipolar, and so curious about that.
Sure. You want me to start, Reut?
Yeah.
I think that is an individual choice. It's really important to manage the symptoms, right? And, do I need medication? And we're not dealing with the medical aspect of it. As Reut said, what's happening on any individual's biology, whether it's bipolar or anxiety or, dyslexia or ADD. That has to be treated. And so whoever can help you best with that, I think is really important. This can just give another perspective. And again, like I said before, because it's pragmatic, sometimes we're starting with how do I need to think about this so that I make good choices for me? One of the folks on one of your other podcasts made a statement about, in order for me to feel normal, there's certain things I realize I need to do. So I think part of the way we look at it, and definitely I have with clients, is, well, what's normal? Like it's more like what's desired, right? What kind of life do you want to live? How do you want to show up? And that can then drive the choices of, I think I need medication, or I think I'm going to do some therapy. So that's what I mean by the pragmatic part, but often it's getting us to the point where we accept that this is just another thing, right? This is what I'm dealing with. Somebody else is dealing with MS or diabetes or whatever, and I'm going to choose to do what's best for me and pursue a life that's best for me. And so whatever team you need to do that, in my view, ends up being a pretty personal choice, as long as you're making a choice. I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to if that's okay. So just to piggyback on what Susan is saying, I think you kind of look at the situation itself, right? The condition itself, and there's all kinds of different, like Susan was saying, you can compare this to diabetes, or people who are neurodivergent, or other things. The brain, not all of our brains work the same way, and there are chemicals in the brain that need attending to. So that part, there are different kinds of team members that you would need to have in order to gain support. But from an advanced applied neuroscience perspective, where we come in and where we can provide the value that we can provide to the team is when there's additional patterns like shame, like guilt, like avoidance, things that kind of build, because sometimes by the time you're diagnosed, and even if you're diagnosed early, other people around you are reacting in ways that make you feel like something's wrong with you, that make you feel like, you're embarrassing them. There's just a lot of buildup around the condition itself, which then people develop all kinds of patterns, um, that then prevent them from taking the medication on time, that then prevent them from, feeling confident and being able to navigate situations at work, or owning their condition and feeling comfortable to communicate it with others and ask for support and all those important things. So our part of the team comes in to help rewire those patterns, those deep emotional response patterns that are blocking people from being able to benefit from the other team members in some ways.
And sometimes the opposite can be true from the standpoint of these patterns where, okay, I know I need to do all these things, right? So maybe I need to make sure I get more sleep or take my medications at a certain time. But now my thought patterns are around, oh my gosh, I can't do all the same things, right? I'm a burden, or I don't want to have to ask people, can we go earlier? And so it could be anything, right? As it relates to the way we're thinking is not helping, and it may be adding more stress and therefore making it worse. So we're looking for the stuff where I'm putting gas on the fire unintentionally, that's not helping me manage this.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, as someone who's bipolar, is like, so the diagnosis can take a long time. To tell a bit about my story, I had my first depression when I was 19. And I had ups and downs for like 10 years before I actually got a diagnosis. And it was this day, I remember it in the summer in 2020. I was like walking around in the zoo in Paris. And I just read an article about bipolar, and I was a bit confused. I was like, I don't know, could it be something that I had? Because I was feeling depressed at the time. And then I called my mom and I told her about what I just read. And she was almost like crying, kind of. And she told me that I had some family had bipolar. And it was kind of a weird feeling for me. In one way, I was relieved because I understood I wasn't crazy. And on the other side, I was scared. I was like, so what do I do? Who do I ask for help? And what should I learn? And then you're like in this moment where you're like, look, should I? And I went to see a psychiatrist for sure. That was my first feeling. But it took me a few weeks, actually, two months, I think, to accept to take, for example, treatment every day. And it was really key for me to find the right treatment. And I was quite lucky because we changed the dosage, but I still take what I used to take at the time. So I'm curious to understand, like, because I see that a lot. So in community that we're blocked, because we're scared. It's hard to say that you're bipolar, for example. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of, okay, I don't want to say it because I'm scared of what people are going to tell me. So how do people, how do you guys help? How do coach neuroscience help to like kind of switch and find a way to help the person?
Mm. I can go, Susan, but I want to give you the stage if you want to get started.
No, go ahead. You start and I'll jump on.
Okay. So, the deep challenge with your question is actually not a bipolar question. It's actually a human question. This thing that you're describing, I can give you examples from my dad, who's now has Alzheimer's and is refusing to accept that he is changing. I can give you examples from my son, who is on the spectrum and um, had experienced a lot of shame because other people didn't accept him. And then how does he communicate that? Even in high school, how does he communicate his limitations to his teachers without coming across as, this is a very human thing in general. We all don't particularly enjoy things about ourselves that we perceive as limiting, but at the same time, we're all limited. We're all limited. There's not one of us who is walking this earth. It's part of the design, I think. It's part of the design of how we're born into this world, into this body. So now the question becomes, okay, so let's say that I'm having a really hard time admitting what is hard for me, or admitting, you know, even admitting that I'm feeling shame, even admitting that I'm struggling with my identity definition having to change and including this new title, this new tag. Now it's stuck to me and I don't know what to do with it and I don't know what to mean. Now, for us, the most important aspect of navigating this is to help people identify how they interact with emotional discomfort. Meaning, so you feel shame or you feel like this tag is uncomfortable for you. What is the next reaction? So you're going to feel this emotional discomfort in relation to this new tag, right? What's the next thing that's going to happen? And to start really paying attention to how you're interacting with that internal discomfort that's coming up for you. That's where our work is. And I think something that we can kind of as a giveaway today for people is to start talking a little bit about how to notice those patterns, how to start asking questions about them, how to kind of pick up on the moment that I am feeling that emotional discomfort about my diagnosis or about how other people perceive me or about all of it, and starting to pay attention to my interaction with my own emotional discomfort, not with other people, not with a condition, but with this experience that this is very unpleasant. My limitations are very unpleasant for me, which we all have, by the way, like I said.
And I think to add to that, another way of looking at it is to listen to the internal voice. So I always tell clients, we all have an internal voice, right? So don't feel you're weird, like you've got a dialogue going on in your head. And so to Reut's point, if we can start to pay attention to that, because often it's unconscious, right? But maybe we realize, that we first start to feel something in the discomfort in our body, right? I'm clenching my jaw, my shoulders are wonky or whatever. And then, what is that story I'm telling myself? And often that's then some of the clues as to, what's at the core of this. Do I care too much about what other people think, for example? And then what happens, fast forward, once you've addressed this and you've gotten some different skills and ways of thinking about it, because internally we're no longer so uncomfortable and, we're at peace with it, how we're then perceived by others changes, right? So I can say, I can't eat gluten, right? And I can be like, oh my God, I don't want to say that because it's really an in thing, but mine's really a medical thing. And like you can be churning about, oh my gosh, what's everybody going to do? Right. And that's going to come off of me. I could say the same sentence, I can't eat gluten with all the guilt and shame. And then people are going to pick up on that and react negatively. If I'm confident about it and say, oh, I can't eat gluten, so I'm going to have the chicken. Nobody's going to blink an eye because internally I'm comfortable with it. I don't care what they think. And so the similar thing happens, if I have a neurotypical brain, if I have bipolar, whatever, if I am confident about how I want to say it, when I want to say it, I can trust who I'm going to tell and not tell. It's not black and white, right? I have agency to navigate that in the moment. I can make those choices in the moment and use my intuition and my gut to say, I trust this person. This is a good time to share it because I'm having a hard day. And maybe I'm a little snippy. So I'm going to say, you know what? I'm really sorry I'm a little snippy today, but, I'm feeling manic or whatever the thing is.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
I was just going to add really quickly is something that I feel a lot of us as is like we're stigmatizing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're listening, it's a tough thing because we tend to think that we cannot, or because there's society who can stigmatize us, like, oh, we cannot work full time, or we cannot do that. There's certain things we cannot do. For example, I wouldn't advise to work at night for us as bipolar, but we can work full time. But the fact that it's not even someone else telling us, it's ourselves telling us that we cannot work full time, or that we cannot, I don't know, have a high paying job which has stress. And so I think it's really interesting. So it's if you're listening, it's something that took me some times to kind of like find a way to deblock that. But I'll let you continue, Ruth. I just wanted people to relate a little bit.
No, actually, I really appreciate what you're saying. And I was going to say something along those lines, actually, myself, which is I think it's important to pay attention to the fact that this is very hard. This is very hard. And it's very hard, first off, because, the world we live in is not accepting, we're just starting to accept neurodiverse brains, and we're just starting to accept people with bipolar and other conditions as this not their fault. It's just the way their brain works. So this is just starting. So people who are listening to us probably grew up at a time where either they were diagnosed and then they were excluded, or they were in some way rejected, or they were some way tagged, or, so either that happened, or they weren't diagnosed, which even can be even worse, because then all of these behaviors and these experiences that they're exhibiting are being judged as normal when actually that's not their fault. Their brain is doing so. It's very difficult in its own. But what I wanted to emphasize is that because neuroscience knowledge about how the brain works is relatively new, it's only in the last 10 years or so that we really understand what is going on. What we're discovering is that a lot of the things we used to think are related to some conditions actually are not related to those conditions. So when you say, I think very wisely when you said we are assigning this to ourselves, some of these things, you don't even know exactly what about it you're assigning to yourself that you can change, and what are the things that you are assigning to yourself that you can't change.
Mm.
There are certain things about being bipolar that are not going to change. They're part of your brain. There's certain treatment you need to it. There's certain there's certain um outcomes or byproducts of the fact that there's a certain chemical activity in your brain. But what I'm saying is that we're only now starting to discover what that actually means. And there are a lot of other things that over the years have been assigned to being bipolar that actually not necessarily. Like, if you treat the person rather than the condition. I mean, you need to treat the condition for the chemical activity, but if you start supporting the person with getting away of the shame, getting away of, some of the anxiety associated, all of a sudden, some of the things that were hyper activating before are now quieted down, and they're not as activating anymore. And surprisingly, quote unquote, they're not part of the condition anymore. So I just want to put a big question mark on what actually is absolutely for our listeners, not for the science community, but for our listeners. When you explore what you having bipolar means in your life, just to put a big question mark around what about it can change and what
Yeah.
about it can't change.
Yes. That's where the pragmatic part comes in, is when you can peel back and see how the way you're responding to things or thinking about it is ramping things up, to Reut's point, right? So if, um, if when I'm having a depressive episode, I start to also get very anxious, right? Um, and we think, oh, that's just how it's going to be, right? And so it ramps up, and I get more worried about it, and the way I'm thinking about it, like, oh my God, are they going to know at work or whatever? Um, Makes it worse, right? And so for me, I've literally had clients where we address the part that Reut's talking about, right? Not the biochemical piece, but the way I'm thinking about it. Um, Perhaps I'm overcorrecting and actually making things worse. I'm trying to take more control from people or for myself, and without any explanation. And then that just puts more pressure on me. And so I've literally had clients where when we start, you have them put a number to it, for example, right? Like, how high is the anxiety right now? Oh, I wake up at an 8, right? And after you learn these skills and tease out, to Reut's point, which part is the baseline versus what is it about your thinking habits and the actions and decisions you're making. And have had people say, I never get past a 2 anymore. Now, it doesn't mean they're not ever swinging, right? But they're not starting to experience the biochemical imbalance and throwing gas on the fire. So it really can make a big difference. It's, to Ray's point, it's not going away, but you can manage the symptoms so much better and take control of what's happening and feel really confident about that. Like, okay, I got this. I know what's happening. I know how I need to think. I know I need how to take care of myself.
Quick break. Can you let us a review on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice? It really helps us break the stigma around bipolarity. Let's get back to the episode.
Something that is a bit difficult for us as patients is you have a lot of different theory in psychiatry, in mental health. And we tend to be a bit lost into because it feels like some people, like neuroscience is a way to explain it. But for example, you have psychoanalysis, which is another way to explain it. And there's, I would say, like, neuroscience is more new for sure. And it's thinking about it in a different way. But I would like to have your point of view onto those different methods and how, as patient, we can navigate through and find, like, because what I usually say is like the most important is the connection with the person you're talking with and you're having the therapy with. But it's also nice to have like, okay, I'm personally more of a fan of like the new methodology, but I'm curious to have your point of view.
Would you like to try this on first, Susan, or would you like me to swing and then you
Go ahead. You're
go
talking.
ahead? Okay, okay. I just don't want to. I don't want to take all your space, my
No,
love.
I'm thinking about which story I want to tell. So,
Okie dokie. So I think I had a client once who she was raised in an abusive family and she had a very deep trauma. And she kind of was exploring the same thing. So she's been to see all kinds of different therapists and all kinds of methodologies. And she came to me and she said, well, can you promise that if I try this, it's going to help? And I said, no. No, I cannot promise you that. I can't promise you, though, that if you don't try different things, you're not going to make any progress. So I think the answer to your question is it's very complex. Because why? Why is it so complex? Because you're not one dimensional. You're not an individual with bipolar disorder. You're Clement. You have very specific life experiences. You have very specific traumas. You have very specific, design of who you are. So what's the right approach for you? I'd say the right approach for you is to try different things. Try different things and get a sense of, is it helping you? Is it not helping you? Now, I'm not saying try something for 3 years before you assess if it's helping you. You can try it and ask questions and investigate. You own it, drive the car and decide where you're going. But if something's working great, then that's right for you. If you feel like you're making progress, if it isn't, stop. Try something else. Be aware that you have options. I think one of the things I got really excited about coming to this podcast was that you're doing exactly that. You're telling people, guys, there's all kinds of different things. Be aware that there are different things that may or may not help you, and try and decide for yourself, is this right for you or is something else right for you? I'm not going to tell you that advanced applied neuroscience coaching is right for you. I will recommend you try it, though.
yeah. And it depends on where you are in your journey. It can change over time. I just started working with a young man, well, he's young to me, where he's done like 15 years of serious, a psychiatrist and a neurologist, and because there's multiple things happening. And he realized he was ready to try something different. And, he's got a lot of parental support. And she's like, oh, maybe you need to do like deep psychoanalysis now because this has been such a, horrific journey or whatever. And somebody told her about this and we had a chat and he just lit up and he's like, no, this is the way I need to try now. I've done that. Right. This is making me feel like, ooh, I want to try this. Right. And so, it may work, it may not work. Sometimes people need to do the next thing. But it's like the conversation we had earlier, it has to resonate, right? I mean, at minimum, you need to be medically balanced, right? You want to make sure that you're, if you're dealing with mood swings, that you're safe, right? And that you've got a handle on it. You've got that safety team. But beyond that, one of the things that I had to learn, in fact, Ray would help me with this, is no medical person, none of these people are infallible. They're doing the best they can. This is what we know now. It's changed, to your point. In the 15 years that I've been dealing with it in the family, remember, what they told us 15 years ago and what we know now are very different. Some of the folks listening, maybe were identified very young as a kid, right? So if you have early onset bipolar, you don't know any different. I remember a psychiatrist saying, you don't know what not feeling depressed or not feeling manic or swinging around even feels like. So what's normal to that person? So again, individual pathways and exploring the different things. And it's not going to do any harm. That's one of the things that I remember the first time I was approached by somebody that had a mental health situation, different. I asked Reut about it. She said, we can't do any harm with this. Neuroscience is never going to do any harm. It can help, but it's not going to do any harm.
I feel that's something like, if you're listening, you have to ask yourself, because there's a lot of promise and it's a bit tough out there, because you have people will tell you got to get cured. And it's usually a bad sign. It's like, because actually from what I know, you cannot cure bipolarity at this moment. I hope, maybe one day. But so it's really about like, first of all, are the person working with medical? And I think that's one of the things that I would really look at, is if the therapist, neuroscience, psychologist will never ask you if you have medical support, such as a psychiatrist, it's a bad sign. I'm not saying it's not going to work. It could work. But usually, like, having this approach of understanding that everybody has this role and everybody's part of a team around you, I think is really important, because there's, as we say, the chemical part, which is like finding the right treatment for most of us. I wouldn't say 100%, because some people manage without treatment, but the people that I know, and I've met more than 1,000 bipolar person now, and it's probably more like 99% of those stable people that I know are taking that treatment every day, like I do. And also one thing that you say, Susan, was there, I think there's some window of opportunity also for therapy. Because if you are in a stage where you are too manic or too depressed, it cannot hurt for sure, but it's like the biggest work, at least from what I do with my psychologist, is actually what I'm doing good, which is kind of weird. It's like you tend to think that, okay, I'm doing better, so I don't have to see my psychologist, or it could be like neuroscientists, or like, but that's the opposite. It's like where you can like go deeper and fix the thing. So I'm curious to understand about, how do you work as a team? Because and it's something that I feel you try to do. So how do you do it?
You mean with
How do
other
we work?
or
Yeah, exactly. Because
Mm.
so you know much more than I do about what you're doing, but it's like the way you coach as a team. Because you're helping each other, from what I understand.
so you mean the two of us?
Yeah, for example.
Gotcha. Well, Reut's been my coach, as well as obviously the person that taught me how to do this. But we'll discuss clients, brainstorm stuff. If I get stuck, she gets stuck. Could it be this? Could it be that? And actually, for me, it was her encouragement that pushed me into providing coaching for a more diverse population as it relates to the brain and how it works, right? So, the first time somebody said, hey, I'd like some coaching, and they were employed. So part of it was professional goals, but, they're like, I'm dyslexic, have been since a kid. Here's how it makes me think about things. Here's where it trips me up. And then somebody else, that came and said, I'm super ADD, and, I'm in a new job, and it's one thing at college, but holy moly. Right. And so each time you expand that skill set, right. Or that exposure, you learn more and more. And to Reut's earlier position, it's not so much, am I bipolar, am I this, or am I that? It's, how am I thinking about it? Where do I think it's impacting me? What about that can I change? I do think it's important that somebody is relatively stable, so for us, it's very similar to what I was told. Again, it's like, we're not going to start therapy until like we're not in the depths of a depressive episode or a manic episode, right? You got to get kind of more even keeled. And so for us, we want somebody that is being managed that way, right? So that they're not in the throes of something. Now, can we teach skill sets about making sure I stay that way and to watch for the signs for it and that sort of thing, yes. But we're not going to be able to impact somebody that's in the middle of an episode. Um, that's where the medical professionals need to come in.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I think it's really important to understand also, Clement, what you said earlier about I'm feeling fine. Why do I need to see a therapist now? Actually, it's really transformation in the brain, the rewiring in the brain from an advanced applied neuroscience perspective, transformation in the brain and rewiring can only happen when our brain is integrated, which means that our prefrontal cortex is easily communicating with our limbic system. Our logical thinking and our emotional systems are talking to each other seamlessly. If you are experiencing any kind of distress, this is true for bipolar, it's also true for anxiety, it's also true for trauma, it's also true for a variety of other things. If you um, if your subconscious is such that your brain is no longer integrated, meaning that you become hyper analytical and you start having like a lot of thoughts and the thoughts are running, and you're not actually connected to your emotions, or if your emotions are taking over in such a way that you can't kind of contain your logical thinking at the same time, then the brain cannot rewire. That is a precondition. So it's actually when you are integrated that you need to go see the therapist or the coach or the advanced applied neuroscience coach or whatever else you choose. It's then that you need to do the work, not when you're disintegrated.
Right. And another analogy, again, to show that we don't have to look at this completely differently. I understand that it's challenging, right? But if you look at the difference between people thinking, "Oh, it was suggested I get a coach, it must mean I'm doing something wrong, or I'm struggling, or I'm having, some big issue." When in fact, for many people, it's because, you're a superstar and I want to become more of a superstar, right? I have these big ambitions. And so I want to proactively gain these skills. And so when you're feeling good, when you have bipolar or any other sort of, mental health thing, when you're stable is the best time to add on that toolbox, right? Now is the time when my brain is really integrated to think about what more do I want to learn about this? And that is then going to help with, what kind of work do I want to do? How I want to add value? Because one of the things you talked about earlier is around, can I work or can I not? Sometimes people can't do full time or whatever. And part of what we're going to look at is, what kind of life do you want to craft? Doesn't mean that you can't add value someplace. If you have difficulty with consistency, right, and you never know how you're going to feel, that doesn't mean that you can't find a way to volunteer or work part time that's flexible, right? And you can advocate for your needs confidently, right? I have things to offer. I just can't do it from 9 to 5. I do think that's important.
Yeah, and to talk a little bit about the fact that I believe work could be from different form too. Is like some of us maybe we won't work for a company. Maybe we will do, I don't know, like we have a nonprofit, for example, in France, and some people haven't worked for like years, but just like, for example, helping in the community, just maybe 2 hours a week, and but they're not paid, but it's already work, and it's already like just feeling good at the end of the day or at the end of the week about have have done something that helped people.
Hmm.
And this is, I believe, one of the key also to stability. But to go back a little bit about what Reut, which is really interesting about how the brain can rewire. I'm curious because we have those moments where we are also losing like capacity. So when we are, as I understood, in a manic phase, for example, we are kind of burning our brain a little bit. So what do you think, and what could be done using neuroscience to help us recover?
Yeah. So I have to say this out loud because it's kind of nagging in the back of my mind. I actually believe this is not scientifically proven. Okay, so I know that I'm saying this my own perspective, but I believe that being bipolar is actually a spectrum, not a condition that is like an on-off switch, meaning that some of us may kind of oscillate between depression and mania on a not as extreme a level, but a much lower kind of degree. And also when from the people that I know that have experienced what it is to live with bipolar conditions, even when they are medicated, they still feel the swings, not as dramatic, but the swings are still happening. So now the question is, am I able to recognize the fact that I'm starting to enter into a swing early enough?
Mhm.
Do I know what's helping me? So do I know to exercise? Do I know to rest? Am I able to catch it early enough? Because part of what's going on with this condition is that the minute it starts kicking in, if you don't catch it early, it escalates really fast. So catching it early is a very big deal. And then knowing that I'm starting to recognize the signs that I'm starting to enter this particular, either the more depressive or the more manic, that I'm recognizing the early signs and I know how to discover what helps me. And you would not believe how, or maybe you believe clearly, maybe you have this personal experience, but to me, it's sometimes mind boggling how much of the fact that we end up getting in trouble is our own self-sabotage.
Mm.
So the condition starts, we start feeling depressed, or we start feeling that mania starting to kick in. Let's say we even recognize that it's coming. And then we start saying, oh, no, I'm going to be fine. No, I don't want anyone to know. No, or whatever else we're doing that is making it worse. It's making it worse rather than being able to kind of catch it quickly. Number one, shame is such a big deal. Like, I keep bringing it up because it's such a big deal, just own it. Say, okay, I'm looking at it. I know what's happening. There's no reason for me to feel shame. What can I do now? And that statement that I said in 1 minute, it's not easy to develop. But once you develop this capacity to notice it quickly, know what helps you, not feel shame, and then just do what you need in order to help you, believe it or not, your swings are not going to be as dramatic because you're catching it early.
Yes.
So I'm repeating myself, but
No,
I
that's
think it's an important point.
my experience um, with multiple people. And even some folks here might recognize this. There can be like seasonal patterns, right? Or times of year that are more difficult. The time changes in the US with the daylight savings time. Oh man, that's a tough one in my house. So even then to plan ahead, right? To know fall always sucks, right? So what am I going to do ahead of time? Maybe I'm taking a week off of work. Maybe I'm planning something really restful. I'm going to go get a massage or whatever. But again, instead of thinking of that as, oh, this makes me feel bad. No, I'm taking ownership. I'm going to make sure that I have the best experience during what is always a difficult time. And build those things in. I even had a situation at school where they did that because we knew the same time of year was always going to be difficult. And the teachers were really clever about all kinds of stuff. They changed the date on the blackboard to be funny, right? So we never got to October. It was September 42nd. And something about that clicked and really was helpful. So it's that creativity, that leaning in, not feeling bad about it, right? This is what I need to do.
Yeah, I'm seeing the time fly, and so I have one last question. Is like, if you have a magic wand, what would you change in mental health?
Oh,
That's a big one.
uh, I think for me personally, um, oh my gosh. I have so many things I want to change with now I have a magic wand. You want me to pick one thing? Okay, but one thing. I think I would change the compassion and the acceptance, not from the place of feeling sorry for people, not from the place of pity or, because I think that's not honoring the other people who are experiencing things, but rather from a place of just saying, look, this is the reality of it. They're not doing it. They're not broken. And in fact, there's such beautiful things about people who are, most of our poets, our inventors, are the most creative people on the planet have mental conditions, believe it or not. There are beautiful things about these conditions. If we can stop with all this dismissiveness and judgment and just start looking at reality as it is, and then shift from judgment to just being practical and providing support, that would be my number one magic wand attempt.
I wholeheartedly support that. So I'm going to, if my magic wand can go backwards, because I think this is in addition to, it would be to erase all this generational stigma, the lack of understanding, because I think it's made it worse. I think that it's like traumatizing over time, right? And all the hiding of it or whatever, not knowing, to your point, like, oh, nobody told me. And you go back in the family history and realize, oh my gosh, there was all kinds of clues, right? Why is nobody telling me this? And I think, like our other discussion, it adds fuel to the fire. It makes it worse. There are some researchers and professionals, again, I don't know if this is proven, that are thinking this is getting more pronounced with each generation. I suspect it's because it's building off of the last. And if we do what Reut says, right, and no longer have that internalized, passing it on, that will help also.
Thanks a lot, Susan, Reut, for your time, and see you soon.
To learn more about bipolarity, go to our website, HopeStage.com, HopeStage.com. See you soon.